welcome. And without any further ado, you have a lot to talk about, I know. So I'll just jump out and leave you guys to it. Have-
All right.
Here we go.
All right, here we go. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We are going to talk about a project that Nemo and I have been working on since June of last year. And it eventually became something we now call the grid. So Danielle did a great job introducing us, and we are the collaborators. It was pretty much the two of us. And so Nemo, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but I think the intros are pretty thorough. So
Yeah, she actually covered it really, really well. And then there are a few other collaborators that we'll mention kind of during this presentation, the people that definitely had a hand in helping us out.
Yep. So here's how this started. This started as a joke, and it goes all the way back to 2012. In 2012, a mutual coworker of both Nemo and I, when we worked at Locomotors, Aurelien Francois, he came in on my birthday and gave me this rendering. Now, it may not seem that much, but basically, this was a rendering of a Bentley project I'd done as a student, and I always wanted to see what it looked like in this kind of Bentley-esque style, and he did it for my birthday present. And it really hit me emotionally. It was a really powerful gift. And I always wanted to give something like that back to him, but I'm not good at Photoshop. I'm not a great sketcher. And so over the years, I didn't really know what to do until this year. And 10 years later, I got this idea just kind of out of the blue to see if we could build a concept that Aurel had done in 2014 for a Locomotors project. And this was a side sketch that he had put together for it. So I started messing around in Gravity Sketch, and then I called Nemo and said, hey, do you want to do this together using Collab? And Nemo luckily said yes. So
Luckily.
yeah,
I was
luckily
jumping at the chance. I love Le Mans cars.
So all we had was this side view and a couple of these images, these screen grabs that we pulled from a YouTube video back from 2014. That's all we had to inform the design. We didn't have any other views, but we knew how passionate Aurel was about Le Mans cars and about Alpine, and we wanted to do him the project justice. So we started sketching the Le Mans car around the side view, and this is pretty much like day one. That's like maybe day one, day two. And we didn't have very much time, so we kind of had this challenge. Let's see how fast we can get this done. 1 week later, we had the car essentially done. So this is where we got a week later. And we tried to get all the details in. The graphics are transparent PNG images that we brought in. I ended up building a little paddock and trying to get the crew. And this wasn't skin deep. So Nemo, take it away.
So when we were doing this, we realized we had a little bit of extra time, and I thought, how cool would it be to really get into some of the mechanical workings? And I've built cars ever since I was a kid with my dad, and so I thought I'm going to throw some suspension and some of the battery components. Nyko built the EV motor, and I built the V6. I used a lot of great reference images of the old Elf powertrains from Formula and Le Mans. Said, yeah, I'll make a twin turbo V6 in this thing. So we kept plugging away, and Nyko would work on one thing, I would work on the other. Like he did the gas tank and the battery enclosures, and I worked on suspension and motor. And yeah, go ahead.
And so that's where we got. We really wanted to do this chassis as well. We really wanted to have like a rendering of the chassis without the body. And so the two of us like started working on that and trying to make it as realistic as we could, kind of seeing how far we could take the tool. So from the idea to full model with interior, powertrain, chassis, and importantly, a fire extinguisher, we got there in 8 days.
Safety first, guys.
Yeah. And like this was something that kind of blew both of us away. Now it was 8 very long days. It was like long nights and the weekends. And we delivered this to Aurel on his birthday. And we thought that was it. We gave it to him on his birthday. We thought, okay, well, nice project. Now it's in the rearview mirror. Let's go back to our normal lives, get some sleep again. And so that was on a Friday that we gave it to Aurel. Nemo wakes up on Saturday morning.
Yeah, there was a ton of sketches, but this one jumped out at me of, now that I'm learning how to 3D model, because previous to Gravity Sketch, I was very novice at various different 3D modeling programs. It was very frustrating, and I couldn't get any traction modeling the designs that I could sketch very, very easily. Unlike Nyko, I sketch quite often. I'm quite prolific in sketching, but it was so frustrating not to see my designs come to life in 3D. And so I chose this one, which was a take on the Group C Lola. And after about a day and a little bit of collab, put the sketch in the environment, and me and Nyko hammered out a sketch in what seemed like no time. And by Wednesday morning, this is what I shared with Nyko. This is just a screen grab from the Collab environment that I threw some graphics on in Photoshop and said, we're really close, man. And within, what was that, really only 2 whole days, because, that's when my kids and wife had came back from vacation. And so I didn't have my full days to myself anymore. So really it was about 2-3 days worth of work, and this is where we got.
And we thought, we did the Lola, and 3 weeks later, we wound up with a full paddock, 4 cars. Nemo had a sketch of a McLaren he had done a long time ago in Gravity Sketch, and so we decided to do that. And then we both started working, it just kind of happened, we both started working on an Audi. And we ended up with this paddock with 4 cars. And we were like, this is really fun. Like, really, really fun. And so we thought, well, why stop there? And this is where the Grid project was born.
As such, we wanted to really kind of discipline our approach as we move forward with other cars. The first 4 were just pure fun. We had a great time just hanging out in the collab and, chatting like, friends catching up on a phone call, but we were actually making things. And so that was amazing. We decided we're going to make ourselves a rule set, and we based it primarily off of the current Le Mans Hypercar rule set, and then we extended into a few different parameters. We called it the LMX Hypercar. The X standing for exploration, experimentation, and extremes, really pushing the limit of the cars, kind of like invoking the spirit of Group C from the late 80s, early 90s era of Le Mans. The other thing that we did was create some equalizers. It's fun to go unlimited with these cars and really push the boundaries of performance, but what would be the way that you can maintain a balance and really exciting racing amongst cars? And I had conceived the idea that it's twofold. Actually, primarily I thought safety, because safety first, as we mentioned, got to have those fire extinguishers. But safety being the way in which you can keep the cars realistic, and then budget cap. If everybody's spending the same amount on their cars, then the chances are they're going to be kind of balanced in the performance aspect. We also thought what one team would spend on a powertrain, another team would spend on their aerodynamics or a smarter suspension system for better mechanical grip. Again, we can go into a lot of detail there, but the idea being that these two things would regulate the teams and create a balance amongst how they approach things. And we actually wrote this rule set out in quite a bit of detail, including the idea that you could apply for safety credits if you're willing to share your safety innovation with other teams, and then you get that applied back towards your budget. But yeah, and we'll be sharing a lot of that, the content that we created in the weeks to come through our social media channels.
We also had a couple other things. We didn't put them here, but we came up with dimensions, like regulated dimensions that are very similar to the current setup, but with a couple different modifications as well. So let's talk about our process. One thing I really want to touch on here is without Gravity Sketch Collab, none of this would have ever happened. There's a lot of other software out there. There's a lot of like really great 3D software out there, sketching software, etc. But there was something magical about jumping into a collab session. And Nemo and I kind of realized it's almost like going to the gym. Like if you have a partner or a friend to go to the gym with, you'll go a lot more usually than if you just try and go by yourself. If you try and go by yourself, usually you'll go once a month to justify your gym membership. And in this case, like the days that I didn't really want to jump into Collab, Nemo would push me, and the days that he was busy or tired or whatever, I would push him. And like it was pretty amazing.
Well, touch on one thing, Nico. You were moving from Colorado to Romania during this process. In addition to that, I'm a father with 4 kids at home. And so our lives are definitely very, very busy. And even as such, we still carved out time to be able to jump in Collab, even being, half a world apart, and really hammer out the things we wanted to do with this program.
And interestingly, in the US, we were working from like 9 p.m. to, I don't know, whenever basically we fell asleep in our headset. And when I got to Romania, essentially the same thing happened because it would be morning for Nemo. So
Yep.
Rhythm just kept going. So back to the process, everything starts with a sketch. And in some cases, they would start with a 2D sketch like this one. And in some cases, they would start with a 3D sketch directly in Gravity Sketch. And we took advantage of a lot of the functions that Gravity Sketch offered, such as like the ink tools, the stroke tools. The revolve surface was really fun to just kind of like, okay, here's a round object that's going to go there. We had a wheel set that we made that we just kind of plop in, and we could adjust the length of the wheelbase. And we would just do these rough sketches, and then we would go in and we would refine them. And so we ended up with this room with like a ton of these refined sketches for different brands. And from there, we would take each of those sketches into their own collab room, refine it slightly more. And in the sketching phase, what's really amazing is, before I move on, we could solve a lot of problems in the sketching phase. I can't stress how important it was for us to do this, because we learned that with the Alpine, that we initially kind of went in and tried to do some surfaces, and we realized like we were getting totally lost. We didn't really have an idea of like how the panel should work, etc. So we started, Nemo and I were like, let's just do a sketch of it first. And we hammered out a sketch, and that became part of our process. So sketching your idea out in 3D, if you have ideas, it's like super, super helpful and super useful. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Nemo.
I would also say that, like, even when we're doing the surfacing, I'll talk specifically about the Alpine, we would go and sketch on top and use that as almost like redefining edges and surfaces and sections, like you would with tape. We were treating it like a tape drawing and really going in there and being able to refine, and especially with the Alpine, because it has such really beautiful, elaborate detail to it. as far as the surfaces. Had we not gone back and forth and done that, the execution wouldn't have been near what it was.
So we would refine the sketches, and a lot of times, like what would start off in this room or as an initial sketch like this would get a ton of evolution in this phase. And then we would start building the surfaces. So here you see like one of the Alfa Romeo car that we did, and this was the initial surfacing. And you can see it doesn't look finished. There's some issues here, but we would build really rough surfaces. Generally, Nemo would do a lot of the global, like large surfaces, and I would go in and do some detail work. At the same time, one thing that was pretty important is I had a tethered setup at the time, and for a lot of this project, Nemo did a lot of this work in standalone on a Quest 2. It's pretty impressive. I think Nemo, you should talk just a little bit about like your process of having to stay really zoomed in and focus on like small areas to be able to do that. So he was almost developing these cars like pixel by pixel in certain cases.
Yeah, so I would set like a home origin point once the car was fully fleshed out and it had an interior. I would set a home origin point like inside the car, so that way that the standalone visual processor didn't have to load the whole car. And from there, I would stay zoomed in very tight onto the area that I was working on, because if I zoomed out, that's when it would start to show its limitations on just the standalone. So I was able to do even the screenshots we saw of the Alpine earlier, and then you'll see some other cars here later, some of the details that I was able to achieve even on standalone, just by staying very zoomed in and working locally. And then what Nyko would do, since he would be tethered most of the time, he would take screenshots, and then I would see where problems were, if the surfaces were a little wonky or anything like that. Then I would, again, zoom in, be very tight on those areas and work on those areas.
So we shared, once we had kind of a rough surface model, we would share some screenshots with some other friends. So like, for example, I shared a screenshot with another designer that we both know, Gabby Hansig. And in a couple of cases, he gave some really helpful feedback. He would just do a quick Photoshop over it. And like, this is a McLaren concept we did. And it was, it didn't feel McLaren enough. And we ended up going back and redoing the whole front end. And this was the first kind of try at it. Here's another version of a Dacia. And when the manifesto concept came out, the direction for the Dacia went a whole different way. But the goal of this Dacia was to be also based on the Alpine, because they're both part of the Renault group. And so I was trying to kind of keep everything simple initially. And we got some more feedback, and we would sketch over and evolve our models based on the sketchovers. Another version or example is the Genesis concept we did. We were really struggling with getting the form language from Genesis. And so we did a bunch of these kind of side view sketches to really kind of explore how we could evolve this, because we just weren't feeling it early on with the Genesis project. So here's like where one of the iterations of the McLaren front end, and back to the Alpine, what Nemo was talking about using the sketch lines for tape. You can see hopefully these little orange lines floating above the car. We would sketch out panels even in this phase and move them to see like how a door would open up. So those orange lines represent the area that the door would take up. And then we were trying to figure out, where would this door hinge? How would it open? And we could use the move tools of the Gravity Sketch to kind of understand how it would open up, how things would work mechanically just with a sketch line. That's something that's like, you can do it in other software, but the fact that both of us could do it and we could do it together, like we could have two panels that had to open up against each other, like the rear and the door, and we could both do it together. That was really, really powerful.
We even used it for panels when we would create our panel separations, we were thinking in the terms of, could this be actually tooled the way we want to cut it? because a lot of times you want to cut something so it flows with the design, but tooling doesn't allow for that, panel to be shaped that way. And so we would use these cut lines and tape lines to then do sort of mock part pulls to understand. I mean, to some degree, it's the engineer is going to decide that later on anyways, but we were trying to think of it ahead of time so that way it wouldn't negatively impact our design in this stage.
We would also do color studies. This was really fun. We would just go in and try different colors and try different materials. And so like we eventually figured out a way to do like a clear coat and different colors over top. We'll get to that later. It was a really, really fun discovery. But doing color studies inside and also being able to bring in transparent PNGs as like graphics was also really helpful and really fun. These were race cars, so we could kind of mock up something really fast within Gravity Sketch. And then back to the powertrains. Nemo really went crazy with them.
Yeah, so this one's an example that pulled from the Audi. I actually had a lot of reference images of the, I think it's the RS7, the twin turbo out of that thing is just a mechanical marvel. And so I wanted to get some of those details utilizing the tools in Gravity Sketch as much as possible to where it looked very realistic. Same with the transmission, as you can see the transmission and the rear axles and all that. So I used a lot of reference imagery to mock that in. Now it's not CAD design or mechanical design, but it's really good for our packaging efforts and understanding how these things need to fit in there and how they need to be packaged. And this one with the twin turbo V8 out of the Audi R7 was a great example.
I think it's really important to point out everything that you see was made in Gravity Sketch. We didn't import anything in any of the cars.
Right.
I will say save for the bucket seat, and we did make one in Gravity Sketch eventually, but we just had this bucket seat floating around. But that was a pretty simple surface. Everything else in all of the cars was made entirely within the app using the tools.
Yeah, no kit bashing.
So here's an example of we figured out a way where if you take a transparent background image in Gravity Sketch, it'll of nothing basically point your camera at the sky, take a snapshot like an instant photo. You'll have essentially clear.
You have to turn on the function instant photo and transparent background.
Yep.
On the photograph. Mm-hmm.
And then if you take that as a snapshot, you'll get a transparent material. And if you apply that, you can get a see-through material. So this isn't using like the layers. This is using a material. And so we figured that out, and we were able to make like a see-through body over the mechanicals right within Gravity Sketch. So this was really a really fun process. And you can use that same process to layer paint basically and make really interesting paint. We'll have a video coming out on that soon, but that was like one of the small discoveries we made. We were like kids in a candy store when that happened. It was really funny.
Yeah, because we found out you can take that transparent layer, you can colorize it, you can apply a gloss coat over it so it looks like glass. And so that wound up being a technique that we use for all the glass in the vehicles.
So lessons learned. Collab is really, really powerful. And for me, at least, as a consultant with Gravity Sketch, I had been using Collab to train designers around the world for over a year at that point. But actually creating something in Collab was a whole new experience. And understanding how powerful it was, understanding how ideas could build up, how you could riff off of each other, and how you could just kind of take advantage of this space, almost like you're at a bar or in an actual design studio. This project really really opened my eyes to that. And for me, I started changing the way I taught. I started creating curriculums that encouraged a lot more collaboration for customers. and really encouraging customers to jump in as well into Collab sessions and work on projects with Collab. It was just like a whole discovery for me, which was just very weird considering I used it every day to train people. But when you actually use it to make something, it's a whole different process. And Nemo?
I mean, the way that we rolled it out here with Modus, both with the internal team here as well as with customers, I learned a lot through working with Nyko and just getting better at utilizing the tool. That interaction with customers wound up being one of the hallmarks of what we do here at Modus, and customers engaged with it so much more than just sending them a presentation with some screenshots. The fact that it was fully immersive and interactive was just a huge value add to our process here at Modus.
There's one other thing that was pretty funny is around August, when I was moving, I didn't have the ability, for like a week, I didn't have the ability to get to a headset. And we started using Screen Collab. So Nemo would be working in VR and I would be giving him feedback through Screen Collab. And that was kind of our first use of that in like a Collab function. And it was really, really fun. And so if you don't have access to the headset right away, Screen Collab is it's a pretty powerful tool, surprisingly.
And right in August,
yeah.
Just to speak to the power of that real briefly, right in August was the time where I was putting the finishing touches on almost all of these. So we started this in June, but right at the end of August, beginning of September is right as we were putting, the nice little spit and polish on these last few things. And so the fact that he could still jump in and call out the details that I needed to pay attention to was super, super helpful.
And lastly, like we mentioned, we learned a ton of like workflow tricks, learned about lighting, about the trick with the materials, tricks to take the files out of Gravity Sketch and into rendering software. And a lot of, and one thing that like, we hit the limits. I wouldn't necessarily say the limits, but we wanted to push Gravity Sketch as far as we could. And so like we kept trying to find new ways of doing things. And that was just like that exploration and the ability that like the app doesn't stop you. That was really, really cool.
I feel like that was almost for me, it was almost as fun as making the cars, was finding these new techniques, because we would just nerd out on them for like an hour or two in some cases when we found out new techniques. It was really, really fun.
All right. So here we are, the cars.
There's a lot, guys.
There's a lot here. This is what you came to see. So buckle up. This is the grid project. So we started off with the Alpine. And we have some nice little teaser images. And here's one of the final liveries of the Alpine. So we took Aurel's initial livery and modified it a little bit. And we decided to do a couple liveries for every car. So we did another one. Next up, the Lola. You want to talk about this, Nemo?
Yeah, this one is, as you can see from the screenshot, it changed quite a bit from the sketch, and then tried to just give it some real classic livery vibes with Castrol. And the next one is very Marlboro, but I didn't brand it that. But it's these classic liveries going back to the Group C days yet again.
We did a couple different, whenever we had a chance, we did like some really nice renders in various software. Also, what's really amazing, one thing we learned, if I go back here, is just how nice the quality of a render you can get from Gravity Sketch. So this and this and this are all done right from within Gravity Sketch on a tethered configuration. McLaren. This was a really fun car. It's it's kind of retro modern. And so we started off with this front end, and this was we decided to, like, we were messing around one day, and I discovered the function of isolating, that you can isolate multiple layers. And so here's all the aero and mechanicals in one image. And we decided, oh, it's McLaren, we got to go with the Gulf livery. So,
Got to. And then they're
as well
currently
as Google.
sponsored by Google, yeah. So in their F1 team, so I figured that was a logical choice. We had a lot of help. The team here at Modus really kind of took the grid project under their wing as well, and so we had Mara Radinovic and Caitlin York, who are part of my team, that stepped in and helped with a lot of these liveries.
Yeah, Nemo did an amazing job. He really was into the livery aspect. I did a lot of these kind of dark teaser images, and the whole project was collaborative throughout, like being in Gravity Sketch and outside of Gravity Sketch. We both took advantage of our strengths, and it was really, really fun. So here's the Audi.
One thing I'll say about these liveries is, as we roll these out on our social media later on, there's some Easter eggs in some of the sponsors and things like that, and so it'd be fun to create a bit of a scavenger hunt and see who picks them out. And they're all regionally based. So if there's a car from Romania, there's going to be things for the Romanians. If it's a Spanish car, which there is one, there'll be Spanish things for the enthusiasts out there. So with the Audi, we did Audi Avis Works, and then we did an Adidas team. And so that's what you're seeing there, is art car versions.
These are the two Adidas art cars, yeah.
We're going to have to roll through these quick because there's so much more. We could talk about this all day, and we'll be on a table later on today. So if you have any questions, feel free to jump on there and find us.
Alfa Romeo. This is where that Alfa sketch from the beginning of the presentation wound up. So there's the surface. It changed a lot, and we got a couple really cool renderings out of the Alfa with their current modern livery. All right, Maserati, get ready, guys. This is a beautiful one. So this was it in Gravity Sketch, but then when this went out of Gravity Sketch, something magical happened to it. Had to do Martini.
Got to.
And then.
So Italian.
There's some other beautiful renderings that we're going to be sharing later on of different angles of this, but this car, it's stunning from almost every angle. So what do you do when you get a crazy idea of pairing Dyson with Le Mans? And who do you pair Dyson with? Well, that was this idea where let's do a Dyson Le Mans car and have really interesting air intakes. So we did a Dyson, and
the aerodynamics of this car are off the wall. We'll share more details as that emerges. But pair them with Red Bull, and you got a strong team there.
And this is powered by, correct me if I'm wrong, this is hydrogen as well. Is that correct, Nemo?
No, this is dual cyclonic motors supercharging a V6.
Okay, yeah. The powertrain in this is beautiful.
And that wing in the back is a Dyson bladeless fan, so it increases aerodynamic flow through and wing efficiency. There's a teaser image we shared earlier this week or last week. So here's another brand that we thought would be cool. Can you guys guess what non-automotive brand this is?
Had to go with Nike. This was really fun. Nemo did all the design on this, and what he did with pulling a lot of inspiration from the footwear was just awesome. This rendering of them testing, really, really fun. and the little chords, the inspiration from some of the fly knit that they have, which is really fun. And also, this is the underlay, like the chassis of this, I believe, is the Lola. Is that correct?
Correct. It's a spec chassis.
Yeah.
And here's
So
this
moving
car
on.
I mentioned.
So
Cupra.
this is from Spain. Got to bring in Cupra. They're up and coming, and they're doing some really awesome stuff. So why not?
And this concept is directly based off of their Urban Rebel concept. There's a ton of design elements pulled from that, since that's their new brand language that they're pushing. And
All right, the Genesis.
Yeah.
So this car, man, had so many iterations. It was a tough one, but we finally got to a place where we like. So here's that side sketch of it, and this was the end result.
Nyko did a killer job on the headlights, kind of pulling from the modern pixel idea that what's on the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and it came out gorgeous. This one was kind of out of left field. China is an emerging market in automotive, and so we did the Neo. Neo is an all-electric car brand, so we thought it would be really interesting if this car had a hydrogen setup, but hydrogen fuel cell, so it's all-electric drivetrain, and there's 2 fuel cells making sure that those batteries stay nice and powered. And that's what it looked like if it was a road car.
So we thought, well, what would this look like without the livery? The livery ones are also really beautiful.
These are pulled from their Formula E team, just working directly with the stuff that they've already put out in Formula E. This one was probably the longest of all the cars.
Yeah, that is a very long one. When I was rendering the teasers in Blender, I set up a camera that I thought, okay, this frames all the cars really well. When the Neo went in, the rear spoiler was out of frame, but whatever, it was black, so it just went with it. But yeah, this is a very, very long, huge rear overhang.
Yep. Polestar, which this was running concurrent of the Polestar design contest, but I didn't enter it. This was for the grid, not for that. We do need to do some Q&A, though. We can keep showing them these gorgeous cars as we take some questions. I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody wants to know.
We're almost done, so we have just a couple more cars. So Bentley, this was a really fun one. Did the initial sketch. Nemo did a lot of the initial surfacing. A huge collab project. In kind of a funny setup, Nemo did another version of a Bentley that ended up becoming
this car, which is the Tatra, which was an accident, but a great accident.
And
awesome.
Then
final one,
final 2. So we have the Dacia. That was based on the Alpine, and a Chaparral.
Quick story. That livery is courtesy of Michelle Abadi, a good former co-worker of ours. Her race car, she is sponsored by Ghost, and that's her number. So this one's homage to her.
And there are all 16 cars done since June. Thank you guys very much. And questions. Also, if you want to follow us, here is our Instagram. We have an Instagram for Grid Project as well, grid_project. And then you can follow both myself and Nemo.
Great. Thanks, Nyko. Thanks, Nemo.
Yeah.
I have a ton of questions myself, but I'm going to not ask them so that we have some time for the audience to actually ask theirs.
Yeah.
Did you guys always model in the same room, or do individual surfaces and assemble separately, then bring them in as prefabs?
So we did, after we did those first 4 cars, we did create a template of assets that were like the chassis, some of the mechanical bits. So that way we could move faster in the future cars. And then we would start in a room typically, and then save that out and silo off. Since we're in different time zones, it just made more sense to do that. And then bring it back into a room, a separate room that would be only that car instead of the whole big group like you saw. And then we'd critique and work in that room. We tried not to silo off too much, because what would happen is there's parallel development. And so we tried to keep it in that collab room, in that space. Even if we were working individualistically, we would still have only one version of the thing. But sometimes having multiple versions isn't a bad thing. That's how we got the Tatra.
Is there a quick way that you were able to orient the sketches onto a ground plane, similar to the snapping mentioned in the keynote?
The 2D sketches, pencil.
No, I think just kind of like the 3D sketches, like, where was there a way for you to how do you orient them into the?
Nyko, you wanna take that one, because you had a couple of techniques.
Essentially, like if something got off axis or we needed to resnap it, sometimes we'd rebuild it. Sometimes we would take the geometry and snap it to planes that we would create that were parallel or perpendicular to the world axes. But most of the time we just were trying to be very careful, like locking layers. We would build the wheelbase initially, and then we would keep certain layers locked and try and be careful when you're moving around. But yeah, the front wheels were always centered on the vertical axis. So on the
Which is
XY.
typical automotive. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, we have so many questions. I don't think we're going to be able to go through all of them. Are you able to work with precise measurements to scale?
Yes, we did. So like we came up with dimension requirements, like I mentioned, and so we would use the dimension tool a lot. We'd make some dimension guides, and we'd use those if we needed to move something like a certain distance. We would just like say draw out the distance with the measurement tool, and then we would move the object from like one point to the other point. That was one way when we were able to do that.
Right. Also with the mechanical stuff, like especially the motors, since we were thinking of what would the displacement of this motor look like, I would look up the dimensions of that, use that measure tool, measure out essentially the footprint of what that would be, and then make all the mechanical parts to scale. So with a relative amount of precision, we were able to use that measure tool for a lot of it.
Nice. All right. So there's a lot of questions still. There's a lot of praise, like, people loving your project.
Awesome.
So yeah, just go through the chat if you can, because it's, there's a lot of people sharing their love. There's even some people asking if they can join some of your sessions and sketch
I
with
love
you
that.
guys. So yeah.
One last thing I wanted to mention, Daniela, is some of the content that we've created, like some of the cars and some of the like engines or wheels that we did, we're going to add those to the reference library, so that all of you can use those as well. So we're gonna be rolling that out, and yeah, we'd be happy to do collab sessions around these in the future. So.
I mean, if they have further questions, we have a table later. So love to engage one-on-one and answer any questions people may have.
Yeah, so feel free to jump into the table with Nyko and Nemo. There's one more session going on after this one, and then after that, all the tables will be open, so you'll be able to jump in and talk to them. Giuseppe is really, really excited about this, so he'll definitely probably join your table. Thank you so much, guys, for this incredible presentation. It was really interesting to follow such an in-depth project. And so up next, we're like in the next 2 minutes, so we only have 2 minutes until the next session. We're gonna have Matt Whitby coming in and present the airbrush technique inside of Gravity Sketch. So yeah, see you in 2 minutes. Thanks, Nyko and Nemo.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.